All right, everybody. Showtime here, Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard back on May 6th here, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, talking Giants, talking NFL, maybe talking a little Knicks as the Knicks heat up and take game one from the Boston Celtics. I'm open to all questions, comments, discussions, concerns. We'll start, of course, talking Giants football. We have rookie minicamp coming up in East Rutherford, where we will get our first look as the media at Abdul Carter, Jaxson Dart, and the rest of the Giants draft class in a Giants uniform. We'll get to see them on the field along with rookie free agent signings, tryouts, and everyone else who's trying to make this team augment the Giants roster and contribute here in 2025 as the New York Giants try to start turning this this large ship around and get themselves headed in the right direction sooner than later for GM Joe Schoen and head coach Brian Daboll. Wanted to start by talking about a topic that I think needs to be addressed and pushed to the forefront of the conversation, and that is about Abdul Carter. But it's not about his jersey number. You know, it's been entertaining, I guess, day to day, driving the news cycle to see what number this young man is going to ask for next. We've had 56 come up. We've had 11 come up. I can't believe he hasn't asked for Strahan's 92 yet. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you even had Joe Schoen, the general manager, calling reportedly Phil Simms to talk about the matter. But it doesn't matter what number Abdul Carter is wearing. It doesn't matter what the wardrobe for the number 3 overall pick looks like. What matters is how he is used in Shane Bowen's defense, in Brian Daboll's defense, and how he contributes to the Giants here in 2025 right out of the gate. Because for me, talking to sources in the NFL and looking at the Giants depth chart and personnel, it looks to me like there's a little bit of a logjam on how to deploy the current depth chart to maximize the Giants' chances of winning football games, and really just how do you become most efficient at doing both things you need to do as a defense to win games, and that is stopping the run as well as getting after the quarterback and defending the pass and the downfield throws. Abdul Carter, of course, explosive as an edge rusher for Penn State Nittany Lions last season. It was his first year as an edge player full time. He had played off-ball linebacker prior to that, wearing the number 11 that Micah Parsons has worn before that. The Giants drafted him, and all of the talk from the Giants and from everybody else has been about his potential as an edge rusher. And surely if you're using that number 3 overall pick on a pass rusher, you don't want him not getting after the quarterback. You want to be able to pin his ears back. You want him to be in a position where he can get in one-on-one matchups, especially favorably with Dexter Lawrence on the line alongside you or down the line alongside you. And you can have those matchups to get to the quarterback, create turnovers, disrupt plays, create pressures, sacks, etc. So there's no question Carter is going to be used on the edge in this Giants defense. But from my vantage point, he's going to end up off the ball more often than I think outsiders believe. Over 61% of the time last year, the Giants played nickel with 5 defensive backs on the field, 3 corners, 2 safeties. The way the Giants deploy their personnel, that leaves 2 down linemen, 2 edges, and 2 off-ball linebackers in the deployment of Shane Bowen's defense. So without Carter on the roster, that would have been Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau on the edge, Dexter Lawrence, and insert this name here as a down lineman, right? That could be Darius Alexander now, the 3rd round pick that the Giants got out of Toledo. Hopefully he grows into that. Sooner rather than later, that role. But you have a bunch of different bodies, even Chauncey Golston, a free agent signing, who's technically an edge, but has versatility to play inside, could also be that player. And then off the ball is Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden on the interior at linebacker. So my question to you, Giants fans, is where do you put Carter in that scenario? You could say, well, he has to play on the edge, but then you're taking either Burns or Thibodeau off the field. Now, you might not mind taking Thibodeau off the field, except for the fact that's a number 5 overall first-round pick of Joe Schoen's, who they just picked up the 5th-year option on. And even if he profiles as a trade candidate down the road, he's still on this roster, and you're trying to maximize your pass rushers. You're trying to maximize the talent that you have up front to get to the quarterback. Now, Thibodeau is not a player you're kicking inside who will be effective there. I mean, you could do it in a NASCAR pass rush package, obviously, and get him inside winning on guards, maybe in a pass rush setting. But when you're talking about what the Giants defense needs to do, they need to be able to stop the run first and then get after the quarterback. Think about the way this team is structured and the way they've played games over the recent years. Their offense doesn't score a lot of points. So you want to have that deep rotation of pass rushers that the Philadelphia Eagles do. That's just obviously the best example of it in the NFL right now, where you can rotate guys in and out, everybody's fresh, and they can all pin their ears back knowing that someone else is going to come in right after them and take over and take that lead. But the Giants haven't put their defense in those positions often recently. So unless the offense has a dramatic improvement and does take leads and does help control games, gives the defense those opportunities, you're talking about how do we deploy this defense early on to stop the run, control the game, and to be able to both play the run and the pass and be more balanced. Now, does that mean then at times either Thibodeau or Burns is getting a quick breather, coming back on the field and in a rotation? Sure, that would happen and could happen as well. But do they look at their personnel and say that they'd rather have Thibodeau and Carter on the field and take McFadden and or Okereke off the field on certain downs and put them into that rotation as well, knowing that Carter can play off the ball and still rush the passer from that angle? What I'm getting at is, as I go to the field at rookie minicamp here in early May, and as I continue to cover Abdul Carter and examine how the Giants are going to use all of their new defensive personnel, I'm fascinated by the usage of Carter. I do think it's going to be more Micah Parsons-esque right out of the gate than people expect, just because of that versatility and all of those dynamics and variables and factors I just described. And the one final factor I mentioned is this: Shane Bowen. This would be a challenge for Shane Bowen as a defensive coordinator in the scheme that he runs and the way he has coached and the teams he has coached and the players he has worked with. He's never had this type of versatile player to deploy in these unique and variable scenarios, and this down-to-down variability to change things up, to bring extra pressure. You might be looking at having to get much more creative with their pressures than Bowen and the Giants defense are used to having. I know I've heard several people say, imagine what Martindale could be doing with this personnel. Martindale's not here anymore. Bowen is. Bowen's defense obviously has received an infusion of talent. The question and the biggest concern on the roster still is the offense, but it is fascinating looking at the defensive side of the ball and saying, how does he work with this talent and how does he deploy this player? Again, especially because the way the Giants are structured, it still feels like what they need most is to reinforce the interior and force teams into passing situations, both with better run defense and with more scoring from their offense. So I'm really fascinated to see how that's going to go. Grateful to my sponsors for keeping us rolling here on Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard, continuing to work behind the scenes on how to continue to build and improve this show, this podcast, and this community for you all. Thank you so much for being here. Brought to you here, of course, by MyBookie Sportsbook, mybookie.ag. Pat's Picks is the code for the 50% match. NBA playoffs are rolling right now. Like I said, would love to talk some Knicks with you all if you're down. I've been watching every night, the NBA, all the series. And so big basketball fan. So have plenty to say on that if we want to talk a little hoops. But MyBookie is the place to place your wagers there. Don't miss a chance to improve those earnings and win big with MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Also brought to you here, of course, by Sal Loretta for Men, luxury menswear and tailoring in Midland Park, New Jersey. One day I'll be walking that carpet at the Met Gala. If I am, when I am, I'll be dressed in my Sal Loretta for Men. Go to Sal's. Tell them that Pat from Talkin Ball sent you. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee. All natural specialty coffee concentrate, of course. Estate98.com/talkinball is the website there for a special deal. And of course, right here over my shoulder on your screen, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. Use the code TalkinBall25 or the QR code right here on your screen, and you'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. Haven't had a single person come back to me and say they were disappointed in this product yet. I use it every day. Boomchaga.com. Go there to start feeling the difference. Welcome, everybody. Here's D. Pat checking in. Says, hi, Pat. Do you think the Giants PR machine leaked the poor Shador interview details to ultimately justify why they passed on him and took Dart? D. Pat, my read on it, and I know some other people in the NFL, if you recall, Todd McShay revealed that and said that prior to the Giants drafting of Jaxson Dart. There are people who believe that might have been a Brian Daboll leak in order to get on the record to say Shador Sanders is not my guy, and here's why, and to try to steer it away from him and to Dart. That's a hypothesis from some folks in the league, and frankly, I think it adds up as well. I do think there's been some dueling banjos in some ways between Shane and Daboll, implicitly, whether it's blame, whether it's trying to, put their, slam their fist down on the table and try to make it clear that a player was theirs. We saw the Marcus Bowe comment by Daboll that he was going to start out at tackle, and Shane seemed to react to that. So that's I think where some people have gone with that. D. Certainly McShay, and I'm not a big source guesser, but that was obviously a glaring nugget that slammed Shador and came from somebody who has talked glowingly throughout the process about Daboll as an offensive mind, as somebody that they respect, etc. So if it didn't come directly from Daboll, it definitely came from somebody trying to make him look better, is the way it was portrayed by some people who I've talked to about that. D also says, is Darius Alexander, the third-round pick defensive tackle from Toledo, an upgrade to the run defense or more for the passing downs for the pass rush? Will they sub in Ledbetter for short yardage downs because Ledbetter is better against the run? Alexander is a guy who profiles as having some athleticism and ability to get upfield. To me, you need him to be an immediate run improvement for this to be a good pick for the 2025 team. So I do think that that's something that the Giants need to get out of him immediately. Like, yes, pass rush is great, but again, goes back to the Carter conversation we were having. The Giants need guys on the field who can stop the run and who can play the situations that the Giants defense is going to be in more often, which is playing from behind against a team running the football and unbalancing you with play action, which is what we've seen, unless something dramatic changes with the production of the offense. But D, talking to some people who, scouted him, people in the league about Alexander and that pick, seen it as a guy who has some upside and ability to get up the field in pass rush, and that the run defense, hopefully comes with that. Jacob says, smack that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate that. D, thanks for kicking us off. Jacob points out, if you would like to subscribe or if you would like to support the channel here, Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard, obviously subscribe and hit the like button. That would help. Super chats are also very helpful, but are not required. Super chats will be answered first. If you don't want a super chat, not a big deal. Pat will answer your question in the queue when he gets to it. Thank you, Jacob, for telling everybody about that. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so if you drop a super chat, I will answer your comment or question first, or it will be up next in the queue. Jump all the way up. Thank you so much. And don't forget to support our sponsors, MyBookie, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Salaretta for Men, and Estate 98 Coffee. Patrick Evans also reminds, hit that sub and like button, folks. He says, love the draft picks. Finally, in a long time, I'm actually excited about the team. What are your thoughts, Pat? Patrick, thank you so much. Little sip of red wine here for you all. Cheers. So, Patrick, what I think is that soon the schedule is going to come out and the optimism is going to be tempered with a little bit of reality on how hard it's going to be for the Giants, but also, just to even put it in optimistic terms, how much work they have to do between now and week 1 to make this promise turn into a reality, to turn it into wins, to turn it into progress. I think that this offseason, you have to see the promise and the intrigue of some of the talent that they've added to the roster come together and come together quickly. We've seen in Daboll's tenure, and obviously with other coaches too, this is not just Brian Daboll and these Giants, but it has gone very much the way of how their seasons have started here under Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. And granted, in 2022, after their early wins and hot start, they did level off to a below 500 team for their final, I think, 10 games. I think it was 3-6-1 at the end. But winning that first game, winning it, triumphantly at the last minute with Daboll being aggressive at the goal line and going for 2 with Saquon and all that in Tennessee back in 2022, that set the stage for a 6-1 start that set the tone for the entire season. And since then, the Giants have started poorly and it has snowballed on them quickly and they haven't been able to recover from there. And I think that, Patrick, I'm encouraged by the fact that they set out, like, listen, I don't like that Joe Schoen claimed that he's always had to draft for need and now he was finally drafting best player available. I think if you go back and listen to what he said in previous years, he's always insisted for the most part that he was, drafting BPA. There were times that, of course, they acknowledged that they had a significant need. But now it's kind of revisionist history to say that. And also you can't blame Dave Gettleman going back to 2021 and the roster you inherited in 22 for how you drafted in 2023, 2024, 2025, right? It gets old. Now, that said, I came out of the draft feeling encouraged about the Giants adding talent at some key positions. I do question the strength of their offensive line, and we'll talk more about that. I still think they did not do enough on the O-line, and that is my biggest lingering concern. But their pass rush got better on paper. Their interior D line, I'm still curious to see if that is better. They did throw a 3rd-round pick at it, which is encouraging, which is more than they did last year to it. Cam Skattebo, I think he and the emphasis on drafting players like Carter and him, and even what they saw in Jaxson Dart at quarterback, I think the element of toughness that they emphasized throughout this draft, it was long overdue. Clearly something that Schoen and Daboll, when they revisited how they've managed the team really over the past 3 years, it was something that they were lacking, that they were not emphasizing, that they almost took for granted existed in football players and maybe necessarily didn't know how to identify it, or at least they lost focus on prioritizing it. So what I'm most encouraged about, Patrick, is I've been banging the drum. I'm sure you guys have heard it. Those of you who are loyal listeners and viewers, we've talked a lot, especially during this past 3-14 season. I kept hammering this idea that on the lines of scrimmage, the Giants didn't have enough mean guys. And, that could manifest itself in different forms, right? One guy might be more physical. Another guy might be more kind of mentally just fired up all the time, right? Steps onto the field and turns into a monster. So it can manifest itself in different forms. So the bottom line is you want teams to be not excited to play you. And that starts with, of course, there's players like hopefully Malik Neighbors continues to grow and is that type of Saquon Barkley with the Eagles talent that teams shrug their shoulders and put their heads down and they say, not this guy again. We got to double them all game. But teams, when I talk about intimidation and I talk about teams not getting excited to play you, I mean 4 quarters of war in the trenches. And the Giants, even though they have made signings and added players to the front, and they have some talent, obviously, at some of those spots, they still, coming out of last season, were not a mean and tough enough team in the trenches on both sides of the ball, all the way across left to right. The interior, especially, despite the presence of a guy like Dexter Lawrence on your defensive line, the interior of both lines needs to continue to assert itself and be meaner. So I still have some questions about that on the lines, but overall, I liked the governing philosophy of the draft, which led to the Skattebo pick. It included the Darius Alexander selection. It led to the Marcus Bowe pick out of Purdue as an offensive lineman. Even a guy like Makari Page, who they're adding as or who they added as an undrafted rookie free agent. He's a DB, safety / corner out of Michigan, who they threw $165,000 guaranteed money at. And this is a guy who can, get on the field on defense in dime. He's a core special teamer. Hopefully, if he turns out to be what they're looking for him to be right away. And, a guy who plays with an edge, who has some big hits that he put on tape in college, including one on Will Howard from Ohio State there at Michigan. And so if that continues to trickle into the roster build of Shane and Dable, you could see the roster improving because of that. Like, think about Skattebo carrying the ball on third and short, right? Like, these are the types of things that hopefully, as your line, you want your line to get better, and that's the priority. But with a guy like Skattebo carrying the ball, a guy like Neighbors, who plays with a certain edge at wide receiver, and you have on the defensive line, you bring a guy like Abdul Carter in, who hopefully is versatile, but plays with, as Joe Shane said, violence. And then you want Darius Alexander to bring that edge on the interior as well. Of course, haven't talked much in this conversation about Jaxson Dart yet, Patrick. But listen, I like that they identified their QB and they went and got him. I'm very interested to see if they save themselves by pivoting off Shedeur Sanders after so much work and zeroing in on him early. Like, it's very interesting to me. First of all, you can see the PR tour is starting and continuing with Joe Shane, and the whitewashing of how much they were in on Shedeur is really just eye popping. But we all know that they were zeroed in on him until they weren't. And I like the fact that they identified qualities in Jaxson Dart that they believe in. If they believed in him, they should try to get him. They did that. I think they put themselves obviously in a really tough position with how they've mismanaged the team prior to this, where they entered this draft needing to make this type of move. They made it. They did it. Now I think the question is, have they built enough of a team to enable him to develop and grow properly? Because the fact of the matter is, and we'll get to this with the O-line, if you're not protecting Russell Wilson and or Jameis Winston well enough, Dart is the obvious player to go in there with mobility to try to escape that. But you don't want to put him in there and ruin his development before he's ready. So that's a really interesting dynamic. But Patrick, overall, you wanted to know how I feel and if I'm excited about the team. I'm excited that there's a new young quarterback in the building. And I do think Carter's versatility and the unpredictability of exactly what it's going to look like with him adds a lot of intrigue. But the focus for me still is prove it first. And that includes the schedule coming out here in mid-May and how the Giants are able to build themselves to attack weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, and whether that sets them up. All right, let's see. Ken Peters says, Nacho, Bellinger, Gano, and Gray cuts would save about 9 to 10 million. Thoughts? Any other early cut candidate guesses? Those are reasonable ones to throw at the wall, Ken. I think you covered a lot of the obvious names. Eric Gray jumps off the page there for sure. Bellinger was a guy who barely hung on last year. Nacho, Gano. None of those would shock me. I think you cut Nacho, like you mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned earlier. There's Robertson Harris as a nose tackle. There's Ledbetter in there in the middle. There's Golston with some versatility. There's Darius Alexander. Is that enough in that rotation? Like, I don't think anybody thinks that you can be putting Nacho out there to play 60% of snaps on the interior and expecting a better product than what you got last year. But could you use that veteran in that rotation, or is it just time to move on? That's a question on the inside. No says, give me a good wide receiver 2 candidate. Who you got, Pat? You're talking about on the current roster? No. I mean, it's Slayton. They paid him to be that. It has to be Slayton. I think that's what you're asking. It has to be Darius. They paid him as that. Abdul Carter has to take McFadden's spot. That's how you make it work, says no. So no, you and I are on the same page on, you're adding, athleticism, an elite, you hope, blitzer and pass rusher at that second level who can join the rush and force the O-line into some awkward adjustments on the fly that hopefully frees up a Burns or a Lawrence or a Thibodeau or whoever up front. Or maybe they don't pick up that Carter blitz from the second level. And also, we know he can go sideline to sideline as an off-ball linebacker. So all of that is what you get. But no, here's the thing. If you're putting Abdul Carter there, are you removing him from the edge entirely? Or are you saying that you want a rotation with him and Thibodeau on the edge and him and McFadden at linebacker? See, this is what I'm getting at is, and yes, they'll have to play some base as well, where you're taking that slot corner, Drew Phillips, presumably off the field, and you're adding an extra interior defensive lineman. But again, that's not an Abdul Carter. That's not a Kayvon Thibodeau. They're not an inside players. So it still comes down to who are you taking off the field? You say it's McFadden, but then how are you adjusting and rotating so that Carter is not never playing edge? Because you have to imagine, that playing on the edge and rushing the passer from there is going to be a part of the asks of Carter as well. Maybe the middle ground is he's off the ball on early downs and on the edge on third downs. You could always, try to mix and match that way. Antonio, what's going on? He says, have you heard anything about the Giants possibly signing DeMarcus Walker? They had a visit with him on April 9th. And he had his best season with Shane Bowen, his 1 year in Tennessee. So I have not heard anything. Let's see. Not heard anything about DeMarcus Walker and signing with the Giants as of now. That would be yet another body. Of course, DED tackle puts him in the Golston versatility category. Of course, if you add a player like that, then Nacho, as a cap casualty, that pushes that player off the roster. You'd have to expect, but no, nothing as of yet, Antonio. But it is still very early, especially for veterans who, once you don't sign in that first wave, a lot of guys end up waiting it out. Like Justin Simmons came on our podcast, Talkin Ball with me and Benny Fowler. And Justin, was talking about certain teams that interested him, the Eagles being one, a reunion with Vic Fangio, potentially, who coached him with the Denver Broncos. Now, Justin still hasn't signed anywhere, but often you think of Logan Ryan years ago with the Giants coming in with Joe Judge's Giants. Those veterans, they typically can pick their spots, right? They have their relationships. They know where they fit best, and they know where the needs exist. And so they can wait and capitalize when the time is right. So for a guy like Walker, that could apply there. Todd says, hi, Pat. Will the Bears finally turn the corner with Ben Johnson and the offseason player acquisitions? Todd, that's a great question. I'm actually really interested in when the Giants and the Bears end up meeting and clashing, because the Giants' schedule is awful. It's brutal. And there are not a lot of obvious wins on the schedule. And you would have thought and hoped from the Giants' angle that when you draw the Bears this year, like previous years, it was at least a fair fight. It was two teams who both had some talent on their rosters, but were scratching and clawing and searching for progress that was eluding them often, even if it wasn't every week, it was every other week. But I think now everything is different. You don't know how Ben Johnson is going to fare as a head coach right out of the gate, how he's going to manage games. I do know, though, looking at their offensive line, when you talk about Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson brought in there at the guard spots, Drew Dahlman at center, and then Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright at the tackle spots as they profile right now, that the Chicago Bears look like a team that's positioned to take a step. Whereas the Giants, I know you didn't ask about the Giants, but these were teams that, if you remember, initially they ended up hiring their GM and coach, Ryan Poles, Joe Shane. Then it was Matt Eberflus and Brian Daboll. Of course, now Johnson comes in to pair with Poles. But those were two regimes hired at the same time. And the Bears end up getting their franchise quarterback number 1 overall last year, Caleb Williams out of USC. And of course, it didn't look the way that they wanted it to last year, but now you bring in Johnson, who had the Lions, clicking on all cylinders, the envy of the league for most of the past couple years offensively. And it's just about how quickly it comes together. I'm fascinated by, who draws the Bears early. How quickly does it come together? I do think they look like a team, especially when you think about, they have, Montez Sweat on the edge there. Their linebackers are strong. TJ Edwards holding it down there. And then Jalen Johnson at the corner spot. I look at their roster and I say, this is a team that looks like they could gel and become a strong competitive team. But I'm curious if it will take a little bit of time, right? Because as much as these teams have the offseason and training camp, you're not able to accomplish the same things you once were as far as putting the pads on and playing real football and having it all come together. I'm also interested in how Johnson, listen, he's a mastermind. He's fascinating. Allen Robinson, who's coming back on our podcast this week, he's there. He has worked with Ben Johnson going back to Detroit over the last couple of years. And Allen just talking about, how creative Ben Johnson is, how much he listens to players, how it's this open concept communication conversation about creating that game plan, how excited he is to put in wrinkles that are going to embarrass the defense week in and week out. Johnson is a competitor. I do think he's going to have Caleb Williams playing better. What we need an answer for in Chicago, though, is can he be the CEO culture setter? Dan Campbell had that taken care of in Detroit. That was the magic combination of him and Ben Johnson there. And so Ben Johnson is going to need to do that part of it, the part of it that hasn't come easily to Brian Daboll, that Brian Daboll can't figure out, that a lot of coaches struggle with, even if they are known for play calling on one side of the ball. That's what I'm interested in seeing, is how does Ben Johnson manage his first loss? How does he communicate to the locker room in tough times? Does his message get through? I listened to his introductory press conference, and when he first stepped into the shoes as Bears coach, he seemed unnatural at times with it, a little bit uncomfortable. It was not a voice that I expected to hear from somebody who is as revered as a coach as he is. But those first impressions don't always mean everything, right? Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia, of course, basically embarrassed himself, in his introduction when he came into Philadelphia, the way that he rambled in his press conference and the way that people were kind of looking at him sideways thinking, well, what's the point here? What's he getting at? It was hard to imagine at that point, let's just be honest, a locker room responding there. But what happened? You have a talent infusion. You have a coach who's figuring it out. You have a coach in Nick Sirianni who is able to relate on an individual basis with players and create and generate those relationships and manage those relationships. And then who learns how to delegate and when not to, and when to stay out of things, and how to foster certain situations to get the most out of certain players in certain situations. And then the hiring of Vic Fangio to support him. Now, that's one example of a coach who found his way on that side of things. And even remember this past year, Sirianni, what were they, 2-2 after 4 weeks? And he was yelling at a fan in the stands, and it looked like the walls were coming down before the Eagles went on that run and won the Super Bowl, led by Saquon Barkley. And so that's a long-winded way of getting back to Ben Johnson and say, I don't know what type of CEO leader he's going to be. I do think, though, that the Bears are going to be more of a force to be reckoned with than they have been in the past, just because he's going to be able to give them a schematic advantage offensively. He does have the ability to look at opposing defenses and craft a way to attack them in a constructive manner. And he can pivot and will pivot week to week. It's not going to be stale. In this way, I think he's much different from a Brian Daboll, whose system as a play caller during his time with the Giants has gotten stale and contributed to the Giants kind of snowballing as they struggle to score. Let's see. Thanks for asking about the Bears. Hirsch, what's going on? Good to see you. GCN says Thibodeau is a total bust. They picked up the 5th-year option so they would not be asked about 2 busts in the first round, including Neal. Still, the Giants wasted all this time on Shedeur. They were at every game this year and worked him out, so they did not know after all that if he was any good. They did nothing for the offense. 2 broken down QBs. GM head coach will be fired after the Giants' 1-5 start. NFL should go to 3-digit numbers. Then Carter could have the numbers 111 or 566. GCN coming with the heat to Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. Appreciate you, GCN. You said a lot there, but that's a really good breakdown. That's almost like a typed in talk radio rant, right? That's the equivalent of that, GCN. I appreciate you. That's, I think the number thing is a little ridiculous. I will say, I did mention it earlier. I was surprised, and I raised an eyebrow when Chris Sims described on Pro Football Talk that Joe Shane had called Phil Sims about the number. I thought that was very unusual to get involved as the general manager there. But again, it goes to show that the Giants organization was enabling this and fostering this in some way. Joe Interstate says, if you compare the O-line and D-line to the Eagles or Washington, they're nowhere close. Right. And that's, Shane and Daboll both mentioned the need to look at their division rivals who they need to compete with and match up to, and making sure that, listen, it's not the worst thing for that to dictate where you're adding talent, especially if it also coincides with what you need to improve your own roster, right? But even though they said that, I still don't think they truly and fully and adequately attacked the offensive and defensive lines. But, we will see. We still have a ways to go. Joe says, watch all the free agent bust signings that will show up. Antonio says, do you expect the Giants to have veteran tryouts this week at rookie minicamp? There's always a sprinkling of them, Antonio. No word coming down yet on who those will be, but generally you see anywhere from 3 to 5 or, 2 to 5, 2 or 3 veteran tryouts on a weekend like this. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Danny says, knew the Giants would go with Dart. Not surprised. This organization, by that, I mean Mara, puts a premium on tall white quarterbacks with connections to Eli. Kurt Warner did a breakdown of Dart on his YouTube channel. Joe says he compares him to the Eagles' Hurts, not the Bills' Josh Allen. And that's fair, Joe. And frankly, Jaxson Dart compared himself to Jalen Hurts at the NFL Combine. Now, of course, that was a top-of-mind player for everybody coming off of a Super Bowl MVP for Hurts, leading the Eagles to that championship. But in terms of how he profiles physically, the running ability, how Dart is willing to take a hit to make a play, but really that he's not wiry thin, right? Like Dart is built compactly enough, not necessarily exactly like Hurts, but in a similar way, not the tallest quarterback, but not short and put together. So somebody who is physically capable coming into the NFL and honing the mental side while having the mobility element to, hopefully take advantage of that and to correct some situations when protection breaks down, when he's in and still developing and learning because he has those legs. Yes, this is not Josh Allen, and no one should compare him to him. It is a little bit unusual that Joe Shane and Brian Dable are using Josh Allen's name so often in connection to Jaxson. I think that's a slippery slope. Obviously, they want people to know that and be reminded that they were a part of the Josh Allen selection and a part of that process when the Bills landed on him. But I think expecting Jaxson Dart to be Josh Allen will leave everybody disappointed and would set him up to fail. Josh Allen's unique physical gifts and his ability, his charisma, and all the things that he has, and also that he's developed and turned into. He's an extremely unique, talented individual. And I think, the encouraging part is when you talk to people who know Dart, they do describe a leader. They do describe somebody who people will follow. They do describe somebody with intangibles that has the makings of a franchise quarterback at the NFL level. But that's what I'm looking at more than anything is, you're right. It's dangerous to compare to Josh Allen. What you want is for Joe Shane and Brian Dable to have hit on the leadership element. And like I was talking to somebody today about what leadership is as I crack my neck here. So what leadership is, it's overthought or it's misunderstood, in my opinion, in the NFL and by teams that, when teams are struggling to add it, tells me they don't know what they're looking for and what their definition of it is, or maybe they have the wrong definition. To me, don't overcomplicate what leadership is in pro sports and at the quarterback position. It's being great at the position. So being a great player, because players don't follow bad players. They follow great players. It's being a great player. It's also, though, having charisma and having guts, like those are, I think, a very fair, that's a very fair three-pronged definition of what leadership looks like in pro sports, in pro football at the quarterback position. Like, I don't think you need to get any more complicated than that. And so, Jaxson Dart, everybody says he's tough. Sounds like people respond to him. So the element that they need to hit on now is, how good is he? Right. So those other things need to be true of him too, that I said people say he has, right? Those need to develop. They need to manifest themselves. It needs to be confirmed at this level in an NFL locker room, managing a professional offense and all those things, and playing in New York. But the element that is not fair to compare him to yet with Josh Allen is, how good is he? Right? Because if you have good intangibles, but you're not good enough, you're Daniel Jones, right? Like, Daniel had those intangibles, but he never put it consistently together enough to ward off the questions and the doubts. So that's what we need to see next. Dan says, "Hey, Pat, my brother from another mother checks in with a $5 super chat." Thanks, Dan. He says, "The Giants love drafting high maintenance divas. The Ball and Joe Shunk must have a 5-year plan to get fired together." Yeah, I don't know if Carter's a diva, but I do think that this whole number situation it's a public relations mess that didn't need to happen. Like, it's just another example of the Giants not getting out of their own way, I think, and not reading the room and fully understanding how to manage it. I think Carter, obviously, his continued asks for these numbers and the fact that no one is stopping him from doing it and is enabling it is very, very unusual situation. That's why I think, could we just get this young man onto the field and watch him play football? Because that's why they took him. I do think it still has to be asked of Brian Dable and of Joe Shane, why they were okay with some of the off-field stuff with Carter. Nobody asked that during the draft weekend. But that needs to be asked sooner rather than later, for sure. All right, let's see. Dud says, I don't buy that Dable handpicked Dart, just like some say Shermer handpicked DJ. We all know ownership has a huge say on quarterbacks drafted. Not an unfair take from you, Danny. Joe says the Giants have not improved the offense, and I am skeptical of all the free agent signings. If these players were so great, why did their teams dump them? The scat man, Cam Skattebo, looks like he could be good running and in the passing game. Yeah, Skattebo can definitely add some toughness and has some versatility, can help in the passing game for sure. Excuse me. Yeah, as far as the free agent signings, I mean, I do think that, Joe, I'll agree with this. I mean, they added some talent for sure in free agency, right? Like Javon Holland has talent. Paulson Adebo has talent. They didn't sign like some of those players that they threw big money at. They're certainly not without talent. Even re-signing Darius Slayton, a guy who, in was it their best win of the year last year in Seattle? Yeah, he ended up going off at receiver. So none of these guys are without talent that they threw money at necessarily. But I will say this about the free agent signings. There's always a dangerous, the Giants have a problem with this too as an organization, but certainly when you really want a team to make a jump immediately as a fan, you look at how they've added players and you say, okay, we signed Paulson Adebo. There's our number one corner. Check. All right, we signed Javon Holland. There's our safety. Check. You hope that that check mark is green and that position now is solved on your roster. You don't know that yet, though, right? So that's I think the question is Adebo a number one corner and he's going to play like that and lock guys down playing against number one receivers this year? Or is he going to look like a number two playing against number ones, right? Like those are just, that's an example of the type of question, to ask, right? Aziki says, I think Bowen used nickel because of pass coverage deficiencies. In 2023, he used nickel 33% of the time. I wouldn't bank on nickel being Bowen's ideal defense. Aziki, good point and good stat there. The thing is, though, in the modern NFL, like even the Giants' 61% nickel last year, that was ranked fairly low among NFL defenses overall. The fact of the matter is, opposing offenses just run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and also, so you need to be prepared for that. Like not only like you talk about pass defense deficiencies that you're trying to address, but you also need to match up with the talent that's on the field. So you could say, well, let's leave Carter on the field and use him in a versatile way. We don't need to add that fifth DB, even though this opposing offense is running 11 personnel or 3 wide receivers all game. But then who's guarding the man in the slot, right? Are you bringing a safety down, going one high? Is Carter playing out in space? You're playing a zone where you're hoping that Carter can drop and drive on that play, or Okereke can. So that's kind of that's the chess game there, Aziki. But you're right. He can change it up, can be multiple in that way. The trick though, Aziki, is, and I guess to your point, it's not even necessarily the nickel element, because like I said, if you go into base and you go 3 down linemen with 2 edges, right? And the 2 linebackers off the ball and then 2 corners and 2 safeties, what you're putting onto the field for that slot corner who came off the field is really just an extra interior down lineman. So are the Giants going to work it so that Thibodeau or Carter can rotate in on that? Or is it Chauncey Golston, Dexter Lawrence, and Darius Alexander there? And now we still get back to the conversation of, all right, in that alignment, who's on the field? Burns Thibodeau? Is it Burns Carter? Is it Burns Thibodeau with Carter in for McFadden or Okereke? Right? Are you rotating? Are you going early down to third down? How are you doing that? I still think that applies. Johnny says, hey, Pat, this regime is more concerned about winning the PR battle than actually winning a game. Leaking the meeting with Shador went bad. Smells like a team trying to get the fans to rally against a player. Johnny, great point. Great point. Yeah. And listen, I would say this. Don't put any of what Johnny said past this Giants regime, because listen, this is very common in the NFL with teams and with the league. The only thing that they care more about than what results are is how everything looks. GCN says Phil Simms was ready to bring back the number. He did not really care, but his wife and daughter did not want it to happen. That is according to Chris Simms. That's correct. Yeah, but I don't think they should have asked for it in the first place. Unfortunately, though, Carter, you understand why he did, because they just gave away a retired number last year. Rich says, Pat, having 3 top pass rushers is potentially genius. Allows them to be fresh for end of games and lessens the chances of putting up crazy numbers, which helps the team in future contract negotiations. Yeah, no, good points there, Rich. But again, I think, well, first of all, even though Kayvon has regressed as a run defender on the edge the last couple of years since his rookie year, when I thought he was pretty good at it, he's still, as of this moment, a better edge run defender than Abdul Carter. Now, Carter could mold into a better one pretty quickly with his get off on the line of scrimmage, getting upfield. But, his strength right now off the edge is rushing the passer, winning. He's actually known in certain times to overcommit on runs and chase the ball and get gapped up and get lost in the wash there. That's going to happen with any aggressive pass rusher. He's a rookie. He's going to get coached on it. I'm not saying he's not going to be good defending the run. I'm just saying, when you talk about rotating them, again, if you're taking Kayvon off the field and putting Carter there on the edge, how is he in run defense? Is it Burns coming off on certain obvious run plays, and then it's Carter and Thibodeau? Are you really rotating the 3 of them and just keeping them all fresh, but playing Carter primarily on edge? I do think it sounds like a game-to-game, like series-to-series thing is how it sounds to me. Johnny says the fact that they drafted Dart tells me Mara has a built-in excuse to keep them one more year after the season, so he doesn't have to pay a fired coach and GM. I do think the money is a factor. I do think, although this season, you would think this season has a chance to go badly enough that they get fired. But John Mara has completely, removed. He receives no benefit of the doubt from me after retaining a regime that went 3-14 with all the messes that they incurred with the planes flying overhead and all that. I mean, if that doesn't get you fired, what does? But there is a chance, Johnny, that they should ideally be able to get to a point this season where they can put Dart in, see what he looks like, but the season hasn't gone off the rails. And if you're showing a little bit of a progress as a team, a roster, and an organization, and Dart gets in games late in the season and you see some progress there, that's an obvious path to getting to next year. The question is, can the Giants, with their current construct of a roster and team, get there, right? Because it's not Matthew Stafford at quarterback. It's not Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. It's not Cam Ward at quarterback. It's not Joe Flacco at quarterback. It's Russell Wilson. It's Jameis Winston. And it's Jaxson Dart, who the Giants are sounding from the rooftops doesn't have to play early. Well, we'll see after we see how Russell Wilson looks in weeks 1 and 2. GCN says Steve Young does not think Dable is that great of an offensive coach. He thinks his offense is 10 years behind current NFL offenses. Where did he say that, GCN? By the way, reminder, we are brought to you by MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag for your latest props, game lines, everything. NBA playoffs, my favorite to play right now. MyBookie.ag. If you use the promo code PATSPICKS on your first deposit, you get a 50% match all the way up to $2,000. Play at MyBookie, win and bet anytime. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. Natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. There's the code, Talkin Ball 25. There's the QR code. 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option if you use those. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. Also brought to you by Salaretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey, luxury menswear and tailoring. Go to Salaretta's, tell them Pat Leonard sent you. And last but not least, Estate 98 Coffee. It's estate98.com/Talkin Ball for an exclusive offer today. Rich says, I wouldn't mind us signing DJ Shark in case Hyatt doesn't take a step forward. I think we need depth at wide receiver. That would be, Rich, I like where your head's at, kind of playing the game of who's available, but that would, at that point, that's deck chairs on the Titanic, I think. Joe says the Giants cap is terrible. What great players are they paying all this money for? The lousy records the past few years. Patriots paid $300 million in free agency and had $69 million left and 11 draft picks. Joe, fact of the matter is, when they let Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney walk out of the building, you know, they have money invested in certain players, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, you know, some in Bobby Okereke, right? Players like that. Brian Burns, obviously, I should have said him first, I guess, because his contract's a monster. You need those players to perform and be your best, you know, especially when you're up against the cap, like you said, when the Giants have retooled, reloaded, and made, you know, win now desperate moves, including that trade for Brian Burns and that monstrous contract for him last year, which doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, what a desperate swing at a player that did not work out in year one. And again, why did it not work out? Well, yeah, you'd like to see more production for Burns, but what's the issue? The issue is the offense can't score. The offense can't score. That's the problem. Like, everything else can then be better evaluated if the offense scores points and you're playing more real football games. D-Rock says Tom Thibodeau can be more effective than Kayvon. Joe says, Pat, is Tennessee cutting Levis? He should change his name to how the genes are pronounced. Levi's, nice. Maybe he could be a good QB. Bears have built from the inside out now, says GCN. Johnson is going to make the Giants defense look like the Dallas defense. Well, you know, I was looking at the Giants schedule and saying to myself, and let's take a look at it right now really quickly, because this is something that I found interesting. So the Giants have the toughest strength of schedule. So this is May 14th is the date that the NFL schedule is going to be released. All right. So we're coming up on it. It's May 6th now. So 8 days away. May 14th is when it's coming up. We already know the Giants' opponents. Their home opponents are the Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, and Packers, and also the Vikings, Chiefs, Chargers, and Niners. Boy, that's tough. Followed by the away schedule, which is Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, Bears, Broncos, Lions, Raiders, Saints, Patriots. Now, if you think to yourself, best case scenario, the NFL gives the Giants an opponent or a couple opponents in the first couple of weeks to try to get off on the right footing, because obviously a lot of those matchups look scary. And if you look at it, you say, man, can the NFL give them the Vikings in week one again? Maybe they have a chance there. Could they give them the Saints? Could they give them the Patriots? Could they give them the Bears? The Bears are normally a team you would say, hey, maybe we get the Bears on the road in week one. You know, that would be more favorable, obviously, than getting the Broncos on the road, or the Eagles at home, or the Cowboys in prime time, or the Chargers at home, or what, you know, the 49ers, right? But that was the point I was getting at earlier, is maybe you get fortunate if you catch the Bears early because they haven't figured it out yet with a rookie coach and it's all new. You know, but they are not the obvious, hey, can't wait to play the Bears because, you know, we're going to pick on Chicago. They don't have it what it takes. Now, Ben Johnson's presence, and as you mentioned, GCN, the reinforcement of the interior of the offensive line, something that the Giants did not do adequately enough last year, even though they threw some money at it, could be the difference in the Bears suddenly being a team that puts the Giants on their heels as well. All right, let's see. Joe says, Pat, do you think the Yankees will re-sign their new reliever, Williams? He is not looking good at all. it's still very early this season. But this is why they play the games. You don't make decisions in May about a pitcher and a relief, about a pitcher like that. You make decisions about, hopefully you get into a position later this year and into, September and October where the games matter. And that's what decides that decision. Johnny says, Pat, are you team Strahan or team Manning? In regards to what, Johnny? Patrick says, hey, Pat, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Malik Neighbors comment about Shedeur. I think, well, it stood out to me that he pointed out that the catch they had in the street was Neighbors in part trying to flag to the public, to the media, and even to the Giants organization about, generate some hype, like what things could look like, which is what it appeared to be at the time. But certainly he confirms that. I don't think it's unfair to have the opinion that he has, especially when you come at it from a player perspective of like Neighbors felt like if the guy's going to fall down the board, that's fine. But to drag him through the mud and to explain why he's falling, he felt was unnecessary. I don't think that's an unreasonable point of view or perspective from Malik. I thought he was thoughtful in talking about it. I do think, though, that if anything, from my vantage point, I actually thought the media was very cautious with reporting on Shedeur and respectful reporting on Shedeur during this cycle. I think that, talking from my perspective, there were things you heard early on that you were careful about, very careful about vetting how you said it, what you said, because of the dynamics of the whole situation. And, I think that, frankly, I think that Shedeur got off easy. It definitely became a situation where at the end he fell so far. Like if he had fallen to the second or third round, I don't know if so much would have come out. I mean, obviously the Giants thing came out very early, but if he had fallen just to the second or third round, I don't know if as much would have come out. But when he plummeted to the fifth, it basically became everybody's job or mission or interest in the league, whether it was media, agent, coach, personnel, scout, whatever, to find out what the hell is behind this, right? This can't just be that he doesn't throw the deep out well. This can't just be that he had one bad interview. There's got to be more. And so that's what I think happened, was that, all of those questions and conversations ended up building to that. Patrick, thank you for that super chat. Really appreciate that. John says, Pat, just tuned in. Any inside info on the Darice Shane drama that led to Darice getting released? So John is talking about Mike Darice, the national scout, being let go from the Giants, and Neil Stratton reporting today on his podcast that it was related to basically a lack of compatibility with the person in between the personalities of Shane and Darice, that they butted heads. Stratton pointed out that Darice was not let go due to any poor job performance, that it didn't reflect on the job he had done. According to Stratton, Darice is a very good scout. Darice was previously on Chris Ballard's staff with the Colts. Stratton saying that, I have to be honest, John, was the first time I had heard information on exactly what had gone down. I've been working on figuring out why the separation here, because that was a name as a national scout for the Giants that was pretty high on the masthead and somebody who was very involved in all of their highest level conversations, preparing for and leading up to the draft. So I found that very interesting. So that story's not over for sure. You have to admit, it's interesting that, someone's let go and it's not the people who, not trying to embarrass him, but the people who ended up embarrassing the general manager last year by articulating the accurate information about Saquon while he was sitting there twiddling his thumbs proudly that he wasn't going to retain him. That it actually ends up being somebody else. That's fascinating. But listen, I would say this. You have Daboll with the coaching staff over the years. You have this report about Shane and Darius. This is endemic of this regime, of this general manager and this head coach. The relationship issues, the problems, retaining staff, people not appreciating how they're being handled, and then really, how do I put this? I would say that this coach and general manager make enemies pretty consistently, is what I've observed. D-Rock says, sick of hearing that Daboll made Josh Allen. Looks like it was the other way around so far. Yep. Big Reggie thinks that Dart is going to be a good player. Deb says Jones was well liked in the locker room and the respect of the players, many of whom defended him. So he was a leader, but not a good QB. Well, Deb, right. So what I'm pointing out, Deb, is that in the NFL, even if you have leadership qualities, you can only be so much of one if you're not a great player. Like, you have to have the production element to be a great leader on an NFL team. You just do. Like, that's one of the qualities. Joe says Daniel Jones will win the Colts quarterback job. Yes, I've been saying that since the day he got there. Intel says nobody was talking about Jaxson Dart during the college season. Giants' plan makes no sense. They should have drafted Sanders. It is interesting. I mean, listen, their plan was at one point to draft Sanders, and then they changed it. What if Carter comes around the edge and, well, yeah, you have no idea. You're talking about like his foot and if he's going to be healthy or not. Yeah. Knock on wood. Obviously, we don't want to see any of that for sure, GCN. Big Reggie says Sanders in Colorado was the most popular and they were getting crazy views. Dart wasn't moving the needle like that. Big Reggie, also the Giants were out of Colorado a lot. Shane only saw one game of Darts at the very end of November, so that stands out. Deb says, where do we stand money-wise as far as being able to get these guys signed? They're fine, Deb. You'll see some cap casualties. You'll see some restructures. But, nothing crazy or unexpected. The Giants anticipate, all these NFL teams anticipate the rookie salaries and what they're going to have to do to accommodate it. So there's no concerns there. Let's see. I think I just saw a super chat come in. Joey B. What's up, Joey B? Always manages to make it. Just able to tune in. Give me a rundown of what I missed. I want Carter in 55. Are we going to get O-line help? Thoughts to trading Thibodeau to the Colts for Nelson? Whoa, a lot there from Joey B. As I finish that Cabernet. All right, so Joey B. Don't know what Carter is wearing, but my point to kick off the conversation was, I don't care what number he's in. What I'm interested in is how they're going to use him and how much he'll be off the ball versus the edge, because I think to get their best 11 on the field, it's not always going to look the same. Are you going to want to take Kayvon and or Burns off the field for him? Would you rather in certain situations take McFadden or Okereke off the field? I think you might be looking at an early down off ball, late down, passing down edge scenario for Carter. I do think using him as a Parsons type makes sense, but that can get complicated. It can get confusing. It's a lot to put on a rookie. It's a lot to put on the whole defense, those machinations, the changing up in and out. So I think, I don't know what number he's wearing yet, Joey B, but I am fascinated to see how he is used, because they obviously do need to maximize him. And the final piece that I pointed out was you need to be able to stop the run. And with this defense, they've added all this extra pass rushing help, but are they going to have leads late in the games to be able to unleash it and seal wins? Because that's what they need, is they need the offense to score. Are they going to get O-line help? Nothing obvious coming down the pike, Joey B. I think what they have in the building is going to be the competition at the guard spots. Bo, as of now, according to Dable, is going to start working at tackle. I've talked to people who think that he's a guy who needs to develop and get stronger as well. So I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to contribute, especially as a rookie 5th-round pick. So I have concerns there. Obviously, Evan Neal is going to kick in to compete at guard. I'm interested to see whether he ends up competing and landing over on the left side and maybe kicking Runyon Jr. back to the right where he played in Green Bay, or if it ends up just purely being a right guard scenario competition that he's working through with, Van Roten, Jake Kubas in the mix as well. I do think they should keep all options open there. You have to think playing next to Andrew Thomas might end up benefiting him more than just playing next to Jermaine Illuminor, but we'll see about that. Thibodeau for Nelson. I mean, I know Nelson hasn't played at the same level that he was at early on in his career since the injury. I believe he had a knee a couple of years ago. But to me, the Giants are throwing in a lot or a good amount extra there if they're making that trade is how I would see it. So, if I'm the Colts, I don't want to do that, I guess is the best way I would put that. Let's see. But Joey B, you're the man. And thank you for the super chat, as always. Intel says the O-line is still trash. Yeah, Joe says Burns makes $28 million, the same as TJ Watt of the Steelers. Nowhere close to him. Bad trade, way overpaid. Carolina saw the Giants coming and fleeced him. Another good point here, though, which is he makes that much money. Again, like I said, who are you taking off the field for Abdul Carter? It's not Mr. $28 million man, right? So it's Kayvon, the number 5 overall pick that you picked up the 5th-year option on. But what if Carter's not playing the run well right away? These are things that matter. David G says, salute, Big Pat. David G, right back at you. Thank you, man. I think we already know Evan Neal will be the starting left guard for the Eagles in 2026 and have an all-pro year, says Johnny. Hilarious. Ford says, all the talent was added. It all depends how the coaching staff puts it together. That would imply, though, that the general manager knocked it out of the park this offseason. And I don't think if the Giants have a bad season that you'll be able to say that. I think it's all tied together. Hirsch says, Pat, will Burns' contract cost us Thibodeau long-term, even if he has a big year? Hirsch, I think that the Burns acquisition was in part because they did not view Thibodeau as the player that they were hoping he was going to be. So I think they've already understood and decided that Kayvon is not the monster contract defensive end that they drafted him to be at number 5 overall. That's the way I see it. So yes, he does get pushed out in the current construct of the roster with the selection of the Abdul Carter pick, barring something crazy and unforeseen. For sure is how it's lining up. Giants think that Carter is the new Micah Parsons, who they forgot to draft. There were off-field reasons for them not drafting Parsons. Now they accept some of Carter's off-field in the selection. So changed it up. So Ford says Carter can play middle linebacker. We can run 4-3 if needed. Yeah. So that's my question though. How do you, do you have him off the ball the whole time? Are you taking him off the edge? GCN says that is right. The Giants are like a politician. They care about spin and fooling voters. Giants, the fans. D-Rock says hopefully Carter figures out where to park his car, in allusion to his his assault allegation that led to him. That was the assault allegation, the incident with the tow truck driver when he was at Penn State. Go and look it up. It is ugly. A2, what's going on? Great to see you as always. Thanks for being here. Giants have Carter. Thibodeau as a bust. Burns is okay. I would say one top pass rusher, says Joe. Steve Young said that about Dable on the Rich Eisen show in March. I will go look that up. Jaws says, I get it. The schedule is hard, but can we not act like Russell Wilson is poop? His worst year is better than Daniel Jones has ever had in college in the NFL. Well, the question, though, is Wilson still going to be at that level this year? I mean, last year, he gave the Steelers a shot in the arm for a few weeks and then tailed off, and the Steelers were horrendous offensively down the stretch and lost a bunch of games and tailed off. I mean, don't look now, but if you turn on the first half of their playoff game against Baltimore, oh boy, it looks just about as bad as the Giants game against Baltimore last year. Jaws, my concern with Russell Wilson is also just not just him. It's also he's less mobile than Daniel Jones was. And so is Russell Wilson going to be able to handle the pressure that comes from playing with this offensive line if he's not protected consistently? Jameis Winston doesn't run the ball at all. So I'm just wondering how Wilson's going to be able to handle that at his age and his lack of mobility now that is shown at his most recent stops is, I think, big concerns. It's not just, Russ is getting older, those kind of things. It's also with this O-line and in this offense, how does he operate? Can he elevate? Can the offense augment and protect him? Or is he being asked to do it all because he can't anymore? He's not that player. If week 1 is a division rival, who is the best matchup for the Giants? Hot Pocket Pete, what's up? Great name. I would, obviously you would rush to say the Dallas Cowboys, except the Giants haven't beaten the Cowboys since before my gray hair started growing in. So, it's hard to say the Dallas Cowboys. They never beat them. It just feels like, why would you want to play Jaden Daniels? And of course you don't want to play the Eagles. So I guess the answer is the Cowboys because, there's some questionable elements to how they've built their team and continue to be, right? But I don't love that pick. I mean, it's just, I don't know. You tell me. That's a good question. A2 says Shador and his dad thought that they were bigger than the NFL. Everyone reminded them they're not. Going to be very interesting to see how his career goes. Strider says, I like the Skattebo pick. I don't mind getting Carter. I just hope we develop him properly. I like that he's fast, but he needs power. Carter needs a bull rush. Dart needs to develop properly. Locks onto one target, needs to go through progressions, and Dart has to be careful running. He puts his throwing shoulder into defenders. He needs to protect himself. Joe points out something I was just saying. Watch the last 6 games of the Steelers with Wilson. 0-6 and no offense. Giants 2.0. The only thing Wilson does is throw the long ball. Is that going to be the offense? They're going to need to run the ball. They're going to need to run the ball with power, with efficiency, and they're going to need the run game as well as the O-line and pass pro to protect Russ on the play actions to go deep. But yes, I agree. I'm concerned about the intermediate passing game as well. Sanders is the highest selling rookie jersey. His fans said they would only buy his jersey from the Sanders website. Strider says, I like that Jaxson Dart is looking downfield to be aggressive, but if the play is not there, he needs to go to the shorter route. He missed so many plays on short routes when deep balls were taken away. Intel says, if Jaxson Dart is so good, let's start him. Yeah, and you know what? Intel, this is what's going to happen in seasons like this, is that rookie quarterbacks drafted in the first round always play sooner than people expect, people anticipate. And so, Jaxson Dart will play as early as he's ready. And the Giants keep saying he's going to have time to develop and sit and not play. But I don't, excuse me, they can say that all they want. If they're not able to protect Russ, or Russ isn't playing well enough and Jameis isn't either after he gets a spot start, Jaxson Dart's going in. We already know too, there's precedent just last year of them putting Tommy DeVito as the number 3 in over their number 2. Drew Lock. So would they even jump Jameis Winston with Jaxson Dart and go right to him from Russell Wilson? You just don't know with Joe Shane and Brian Dable. You just don't know. Joe says Carter should wear 65. Add together, he is 11. Look at Joe thinking. Strider says you should wear 98. Jesse Armstead was a great linebacker. Will Carter get Gary Reason's blessing to wear 55, says D-Rock. Strider says if you think just Carter can't play run well, neither does Burns or Thibodeau. They suck at it. But see, Strider, even though Thibodeau has regressed as a run defender, that's why I still think as a body and as an edge setter, he's got to be early on better than what Carter is going to be out of the gate. Now, if Carter is a good run defender on the edge in the NFL, problem solved, except again, like I said, where are you putting the other guys? You're just taking Kayvon off the field. He's not playing. Are your best 11 on the field now, right? So that you're solving one problem but creating another. Right, as Joey B points out, Reasons doesn't have to. It's already in circulation, and O lineman has it now. Pat, you got any leaks on the schedule? Not yet, Joe. Sorry, man. It's going to be really hard. Joe says Thibodeau is going to ask for 25, 30 million. They're not re-signing him. He can't ask for that off of what he's put on tape so far. So he's got to put more on tape to ask for something like that. Carter was not a great off-ball linebacker. Parsons was better off-ball linebacker and made more plays. What are you guys watching? Strider, I'm not saying Abdul Carter is a great off-ball linebacker and therefore should play there and not the edge. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, how are you deploying your best 11 on the field as the Giants defense, as Shane Bowen? And if you put Carter on the field at edge, who are you taking off the field? So if you're saying it's Thibodeau, are you saying Kayvon Thibodeau is only playing, 15 snaps a game on the edge? I mean, maybe you are. I don't know. And maybe that's the answer. But my point is that there are conversations to be had about how to deploy Carter in different ways to get your best 11 on the field in certain situations. And I think it's going to make him an off-ball linebacker more often than people realize to work in their best 11 in situations. I'm not saying they're not abandoning him on the edge. That's not what I'm saying. They drafted him as an edge rusher. But he does have this ability and I do think it's something to think about in his usage. Joey B says, Pat, I'm glad you're back. I know you needed to recharge, but I got to know, are we back in business? This is like Wedding Crashers. What do you like better, football or wedding season? Football. Joey B, feeling good. Getting back in the swing of things here. Of course, this is the time of year to recharge and reload and to continue to build behind the scenes what we're doing here on Talkin Ball. So much more coming down the pike. Excited about it all. But yes, glad to be back. And thank you always for being here and supporting, Joey B. I appreciate you. I actually gave you a shout out, Joe. I don't know if you saw it. I was on with the Revival guys, New York Revival, and that's always a great podcast. Give them a like and a subscribe to, as well as here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. And one of the fans checked in and asked if I would support him for Fan of the Year. And I said that I had your back, Joey B. I said, sorry, man, but no offense, but I got to go with my guy, Joey B Comedy. That's what I said. So I got your back, man, even when I'm on other podcasts, other shows, because I know you have mine. Into, what's up? Into, always supporting the channel. Thank you, man, for the super chat. I appreciate you. Does Deonte Banks get pushed at CB2 by the rookies? I mean, he'd better. This NFL teams don't get better when they don't create competition and let the best man win. I'm skeptical that the Giants have a better corner on the roster than him, who's going to just like snag it from him on the outside, steal that job from him. But yes, they will you have to create a competition there. I do think, do I think Joe Shane and Brian Dable are going to let Deonte Banks lose an outside corner battle and make him a backup or a guy who doesn't play and only plays special teams if he loses that battle? I'll believe it when I see it. But, you can't let competition not occur. You can't let it be anything but a meritocracy. And remember, Dexter Lawrence basically losing his head and losing his cool and feeling like, showing extreme frustration, on the field and on the sideline last year was related in part to his frustrations with Banks. So it'll be interesting to monitor that as well. We still have not talked to Dexter Lawrence since his injury in Dallas. Let's see. If anyone thinks Shedeur is a better quarterback than Dart, they obviously do not watch college football and they listen to Mel Kiper's clown hype, says I'm a fan. Let's see. Will says, thoughts about GVR competing with JMS for the center spot, maybe even beating him out, contingent on Neil, Bo, Kubis, etc., winning the guard spot. Will, I asked this question of Dable and Shane at one point, and they said JMS is our center. So I found that interesting because I thought, based on his play and based on their need to get stronger on the interior, I thought everything would be on the table and that his job could be potentially in jeopardy at the center spot, the starting center spot, John Michael Schmitz. So even though they said that, I personally wouldn't put it past them. Again, will they bench their second round draft pick and sit him and play someone in front of him? Don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. But I do think there are enough guys on the roster with center flex, like you mentioned GVR. There's Runyon has some of that flex, even though I wouldn't expect them to move him there. I know this was interesting. I was listening to McShay's post-draft podcast, and he said that he thought Marcus Bowe out of Purdue sounded like a guy who could develop into a good NFL center. So I'm not saying he would be the center this year, but I found that interesting. I hadn't heard somebody mention that before. I know that Bowe told us he worked on the center position during this offseason, but that was the first time I heard an evaluator or somebody who scouts players say he actually thinks that his best fit in the NFL might end up being center because of his physical traits. Joey B says, not for nothing, but last 6 games Steelers, those guys couldn't catch a cold. Oh, blaming the drop passes. All right. He's defending his guy, Ross. I love it. A2 says, did you watch Gruden and Dart YouTube segment? Kid is very likable. Yes, that was the thing I heard about him very early with both Dable and a lot of other coaches, including Kevin Stefanski of the Browns, was just, if you meet him, you're going to like him. I mean, Jaxson Dart's the guy who gets the job with the in-person job interview. That's who he is. Strider says, I think the last 4 or 5 games Dart will play. If they're able to hold out that long before he plays, Strider, you're looking at Joe Shane and Brian Dable most likely coming back. If they're not, then if he ends up going in earlier, then probably know it went off the rails. Chris Peace, good to see you. I'm actually excited about this season, says Chris. Good, Chris. I'm trying to be as well. I'm excited about the new blood in the building, the quarterback, Carter, all that. It's you want to see some positivity. You want to see some improvement in production and in results and the excitement that these games bring. Like I said, watching the offensive side of the ball, Carter's usage on defense, but really curious about the offensive side of the ball because I don't feel like they put a ton of meaningful improvements into it from a personnel standpoint. So I'm curious to see how it comes together. Joey B says, based on our schedule, I have us winning 5 to 6 games max. That is setting the bar low so I can avoid being that disappointed this year. Oh, right now it definitely looks like a 3-4 win season on paper on the schedule, but you have to see how it plays out. And again, like I said, if they start well, they will get they can get some juice going. They can get it flowing. Maybe a rookie makes a big play early. Maybe Abdul Carter is a star right off the bat. Like, you never know. Maybe Russell Wilson, like you were pointing out, does turn back the clock a little bit. So there are ways to avoid that happening. But yes, it's impossible not to look at their schedule the way it lays out and not be worried about how difficult it's going to be, because they've drawn the AFC West and the NFC North. They're the last 2 divisions you'd want to draw, and they're in the other division you don't want to be in or play against, and that's the NFC East right now. Chris says, do you think play more press coverage that both cornerbacks do? Is that a question I think you're asking? Well, Banks needs to play press to get the best out of him. Not as good in drop coverage. That was part of the issue. That's been part of the issue under Bowen here. Bowen, that's what Bowen runs though. So be interesting to see how much he adjusts or not. Chris says, like there isn't a rush to start Jaxson Dart, there shouldn't be a rush to start Abdul Carter. Not saying he should sit for multiple games, but you can work him in. That's an interesting perspective, Chris. I would find that very difficult to believe that they would be able to do that with the number 3 overall pick, who is a guy who goes to the quarterback. But to your point, Chris, are you early on keeping him fresh for obvious pass rush situations to just pin his ears back and then working him in that way? Listen, I think if you're drafting a defensive end or edge at number 3 overall, he's playing. So I hear what you're saying, but that would surprise me. I wouldn't hate if they were in the position, the luxury spot to be able to do that, though. GCN thinks that the draft pick for the Steelers will be a bust because you shouldn't draft an O-line or D lineman from Oregon. We will see. That kid does profile as a tough dude and a good player. Yes, Joey B, I did. Promise. Chris says Adebo pushes Banks to CB2. Yeah, for sure he pushes Banks to CB2. The question is, does someone else push Banks out of CB2 down the depth chart? D-Rock says, how long are Shane and Dable going to last? Gut feeling. Will this all be blown up next year? My guess is Dable is done by, week 8 or week 10, if not sooner. And then Shane is, well, listen, if it goes off the rails early, then both of them could be done this year. If it doesn't go off the rails right away, but then it goes off the edge and Dable is clearly overwhelmed and overmatched, and Shane has an ability to point to a few acquisitions and play that PR spin game, I could very much see Shane sticking it out with another coach and convincing ownership and the other people in the front office, playing that politics that he deserves another chance and that he should ride out the 5-year contract. I could very much, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I don't think, I've said all along that John Mara sounds like he is more in Shane's corner than Dable's corner to me in what he said after the season. Yeah, JMS needs to get stronger. I don't think he's not tough. I think it's physical strength. Oh, Chris. Yeah, Chris was there. Right. Okay. He says, I was there. It's partially my fault. We've been pushing Momo for fan of the year. That's right. It was Momo. And Carl Banks is fully on board, as is Pepper Johnson. Ooh, Joey B. Scandal. Aziki says, a lot of scouts I watch like the idea of Bo at center. That's interesting, right? Oh, you pointed that out before I said it. That's funny. Chris, do I think the Giants use more press man coverage? That would get better play out of Banks. I think, Bowen does use it, but he's more of a drop coverage zone scheme. So I don't think he's going to go completely away from what he does. I mean, they hired him to run this defense. And remember what Bowen runs and playing more zone and keeping the ball in front of you and not being as exotic. That is what is more familiar to Dable coming from Buffalo with Sean McDermott. And so, you're right. It is kind of fitting a square peg in a round hole, trying to ask Banks especially to play so much drop when he's better in man. But, so I think variability to it, attacking it. This is why there's a lot on Bowen's plate to manage this. Good question. Chris says, to me, if the owner let you pick a quarterback, you've got to give time to see if he's good with this coach, not do what they did with Jones and fire the coach after rookie season. For sure, Chris, you don't ideally want to fire anybody this year. You never want to, but you don't want to do the thing where you finally draft the QB and then you blow it up and you marry that quarterback to people who didn't draft him. You don't want to do that. So certainly that's what that quarterback selection points to being possibly the case. And that's what the Giants are hoping for. It's just a question of whether they can actually put a competent product on the field, because they were 3-14 last year. So can you really justify running that back again if you have another season like that. Joey B says, give us what you know and can about the Sanders meeting and the challenge of Daboll on the calls, and why was Sanders pissed he got called out, and what did he say? No, it was Joey. It was very, very straightforward. Basically, the Giants put mistakes intentionally into the install to see if players will pick it up based on what they know the expectations should be of that situation. And, Sanders did not take constructive criticism from Daboll well about it. I think I know, Joey, is that the part of, the reason they went back to Colorado to meet with him again is because they wanted they needed reassurance and wanted reassurance of what work does this guy put in? How much can we trust him as a coachable developmental player? Can we see eye to eye, or has that ship sailed? So the takeaway from it all was, it was the off-field evaluation. And you saw the details as they were reported. Listen, I think it's interesting that Daboll has such a strong voice in this after how poorly these last few years have gone. And it's really interesting that he was able to sway this decision away from the direction that Shane was taking it early on. Shane eventually settled on Dart as well, but it's super interesting that Daboll had this kind of influence. And as we talked about earlier, the leaks about this are equally as interesting. Joey B says, all good about the fan of the year vote. I actually lost by 1 vote 2 years ago. Then I had a ton of votes last year, and the NFL made the final decision, and an older man won, so I give up. Ouch. Joey B, don't give up. Don't give up. You're telling me to keep producing content on here. I'm telling you, don't give up, man. You deserve it. Over under 9 games until Dart starts, says Steven. That's a great question, Steven. I say under. What do you guys say? John says, if Aaron Rodgers decides to retire, would the Giants trade Winston to Pittsburgh? There aren't too many options for the Steelers if that happens. That could be an option, especially because no matter what anyone tells you, like, there's no way Jameis Winston came here expecting to be an afterthought second backup to Russ with a rookie coming in, and you're probably not playing at all. Like, what are you talking about? Joe says Broncos dumped Wilson, took $85 million cap hit. Super Bowl winning coach. Steelers dumped Wilson, Super Bowl winning coach. Correct. What do I think the Giants' record will be? When the schedule comes out, I'll make my prediction, Strider. I looked at it today, just the opponents, and I don't think I found more than 4 wins on the schedule. So I'll need to see how the schedule breaks down, the timing of the games, and how I'm feeling in the moment. But on the 14th, or when the schedule comes out, I will. We'll do a Talkin Ball live, and we will do game by game predictions and my final prediction. But I'm certainly leaning on the 3-4 win side right now. Welvin says JMS is 26. He's not getting much stronger. We're going to need a center next year. Both are fired by game 8 or 9, says GCN, when the fans start flying drones inside the stadium with Marishane and Daboll out signs. Strider says, Pat, when Daboll was OC in Buffalo, he was super aggressive, didn't really run the ball. I know he would ignore McDermott about running the ball. That's true. That's true. But abandoning the run when you're not protecting well enough, and when you haven't built a lead, and it doesn't help control the game. It doesn't help the defense, right? You need to complement your defense. You're right. They did have some success with that at times in Buffalo, but again, it was with Allen. Allen is a super unique player. But I did find it funny. I said this when they signed Singletary back initially. I said, does everybody know that they just gave a good amount of money to a running back that they never handed the ball off to in Buffalo? So you're right. Daboll would prefer to throw the ball 70 times a game. But the way that they're built, what Russell Wilson needs to succeed, what this team needs to succeed is going to be a running game. That's what they needed last year. They're going to need it again. This is not a run and gun, run and shoot offense here. Strider says, I don't want them to lose their jobs, but I fear they could both be gone by Halloween. I think that's a fair way of saying it. Joe says the Bills are much better now under their current offensive coordinator and with a running game than they were under Daboll. Don't give up. Great Peter Gabriel song, says A2Z Me. Chris doesn't like Arthur Smith. It feels like that reflects on the Steelers. I actually like Smith as an OC. I'm not sure if he'll do well as a head coach next time he gets a job, but I like him as an OC. I thought they did a lot well in Pittsburgh. I just thought there was a limit to what you could unlock there. Daboll should be able to make Winston a top quarterback if he made Josh Allen one. Threw for 5,000 yards, 31 and 30 with Tampa. He should be able to cut the interceptions to 10 to 15. When do we start the Fan of the Year campaign, says Joey B. Are you going to publicly endorse? I'm in, Pat. We got to go against Banks and Pepper. That would be pretty fun. Strider agrees with running the ball. It's part of Giants history. Ball control is super important. Joey B wants Wink back still, no doubt, especially with some of these weapons. The Giants staying with Gano. He's getting up there and has been injured, says John. More clarity coming on some of those veterans in the coming days and weeks as the offseason progresses here, John. To get to close on the running the ball here, Giants history part, Strider. I'm glad you brought us full circle to this, which is, the addition of Abdul Carter makes you excited about the possibility of what the pass rush and what the defense can be. But the offense needs to complement that personnel and enable it to be used efficiently and maximized in the right game situations. And so if the Giants want to be turn back the clock to the traditional way of Giants winning, they do need on offense to score more points and also control the ball, right? Run the ball, score touchdowns, give your defense a lead, and don't force them back onto the field so quickly when you don't score in order for them to stay fresh and then to pin their ears back in those moments. So that running the game element, running the ball element, the physical toughness, the wear and tear you put on the other team's defense and on their psyche, all of that needs to complement what you hope they just built as a defense. Right. Nacho, a possible hit. That's right. If things go south, does Shane actively push to fire Daboll to save himself? Definitely already seen a split there behind the scenes that I've written about for sure. Definitely not on the same page. Relationship not as collaborative as it once was. So from what I've seen is implicit shots taken, and I think it'll only continue to get uglier. Strider says, what made you want to do YouTube? Strider, TikTok, when it got really big a few years ago, I was working on building my, podcast and content more on TikTok initially, figuring out what it was. And what I recognized was it was still, now you can do lives, right? On TikTok, on Instagram, things like that. But YouTube was just more conducive to building a community, right? I feel like a lot of people already on YouTube, whether they're searching for how to fix something in their house or whether they watch podcasts there or whether they're using YouTube TV to consume games, it's just connected in so many different ways to what people are already using. So it's more convenient, I think, for the user. I also just like this ability of going to the place where, basically it's the same format that I record my podcast in. And so it can be a consistent product that I can bring you guys. And I really like kind of the way the chat room functions. I also find the community on here compared to some of the other apps to be very civil. So, I think we have found each other on YouTube as it continues to grow. It's like, it's not X and it's not even Instagram at times can be a place where people are being nasty in the comments and the conversation veers certain ways. I like how this is, I like how the YouTube conversation, and that's credit to you guys as a community and as people and as fans. These are constructive conversations. It's not people yelling at me saying they hate my criticism or It's not, rah rah, everything's fine. It's nuanced. It's analysis. And also I know we could do this on TikTok or Instagram too, or even on Twitter Space or on X Spaces, which I join other people's spaces sometimes. But I like people seeing my face. Um, we did a collaboration with Authentic last year on the podcast. Another great content creator. That was a lot of fun. I intended to do one a month last season, got away from it, but really, honestly, it couldn't have gone any better with Authentic. So I hope to do more of those. But again, the idea is to kind of collaborate with you all, bring more guests on myself. And that was kind of how it snowballed there. Was YouTube was the best way to combine all of what I was looking for into one place. Steven says Saints, Patriots, Bears, Raiders are the most likely wins, even then they're not locks. Niners are wild cards, and they could split with the Cowboys. Interesting. A2 says, what record do you think is the minimum for Shable to keep their jobs? Or do you feel Mara is sticking with these guys for a while, no matter what happens next year? I think if the early part of the season looks promising enough, like if they, I don't know, like if they start 3-3 and then the rest of the season is unsatisfactory, but they've put some good football on tape. They had a win or here or there where they scored 25 or 28 points. Carter has some sacks, Neighbors has some touchdowns. Dart looks like he's developing well. There's a plan to get him in place behind the scenes, in week 12. You could already see at that point, Mara's like, okay, let's see what this looks like. Let's plug Jaxson in next year, and then we'll evaluate everybody then. I think the way it's not like a record, it's more like if the bottom falls out on them early and they can't even get to that, that's how they lose their jobs. Did Buffalo have a good offensive line when Daboll was there? It will tell you a lot if Daboll is a quarterback guru or not. Yes, they were they were pretty good, and they were mean. Candyman, great to see you. Better late than never. Jerry Jones is still working on a big time trade, says Joe. Interesting. Michael says our cap is set up perfectly for next season. Can bring in 2 top O linemen after clearing Jones dead money. Russell Wilson, Singletary, and Gano. Damn near can squeeze a lot more talent. Interesting. Joe says Pat needs to build his brand on social media in case the Daily News goes bankrupt or replaces everyone with AI or robots. I'm actually a robot. Strider says freaking awesome response, Pat. True professional. Thank you, Strider. I appreciate that, man. You're asking good questions and providing great insight tonight, as always. Michael says, I like it much better this way. Authentic podcast was amazing. That was an early one I saw of you. Thank you, Michael. Strider says, I truly want to talk about the Giants, but for now, I'm just streaming video games. Well, no, hopefully this platform, I hope, gives you guys all an opportunity to have your voice heard. That's why I really try. I know sometimes we have a busy enough chat where I can't get to them all, but when I can, I want to get through it all because I want all of your voices heard. A lot of times what you guys are saying are things that I haven't said yet or I haven't thought of yet. And a lot of times you're either jogging something in my mind as a response, or you're even teaching me something that you saw that maybe I didn't see, or maybe you saw something from a different angle, or you saw a piece of content that I haven't seen yet, like the Steve Young thing that GCN mentioned. Joe says, Pat, there's some software where you can stream live on all social media simultaneously. I watch one computer show that streams on 8 sites at once. Jeez. That's gutsy. Strider says 8 to 10 wins. Oh, I like that optimism, Strider. We're definitely going to, excuse me. We will definitely get into that comment as we get to the schedule release. Strider, you got to come back when we do our schedule release episode, and I want to hear all about why that is. Joey B, I'll let you co-host. Listen, let's go. Let's get this fan of the year stuff going, and maybe we'll have a fan of the year episode where we talk to you about who you are and why you're worthy, and we get into that. Maybe we do that. Joe thinks they have to average 24 points per game. Ford says Brandon Brown will be general manager and Mike Kafka will be head coach if this doesn't work out. I don't think so. Strider thinks I need to do a stream with Tim online Big Blue. He keeps it real and tells it how it is. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Steven says Shayball's job depends on their draft position relative to a top quarterback prospect next year. There's no point in firing them unless there's a fresh start ready for the team. Joey B says, I watch a lot of Giants content. I love talking Giants, now Giants Nation, and I watch Carl on the Believe Network, but Pat is the best show and content by far for the fans. Thank you so much for saying that, Joe. I really appreciate you, man. I mean, you know that, but I mean, come on. That means as much as anything. Let's see. Oh, Strider thinks 8 to 10 games is what they need to win to keep their jobs. Got it. Let's see. Michael thinks Daboll and Shane bought themselves another year with this best player available draft. 2 good drafts in a row from a tactical value perspective. Now have a 21-year-old quarterback with a 21-year-old star playmaker on both sides. That's the hope. Into says, what happens if Andrew Thomas misses significant time due to injury? Do they move on? Yeah, at that point, Into, then you're talking about their first pick next year has to be a left tackle, right? Because at that point, you have 3 straight years of missing him for significant time due to a major injury. So that would be, yeah. Joe thinks we need to give a prize to the fan who picks the Giants record and what date they get fired when we do the schedule episode. All right. Michael says this schedule is too tough to give them a win-loss mandate. I'd like us to be ready to unleash Dart with a lighter schedule, some big free agent linemen, and first round 26 receiver. Do I think Skattebo will dominate year 1? We need a power game, and I think we have Thunder and Lightning 2.0. Thoughts? I do think you think goal line for Skattebo and, short yardage, those types of things, and then trying to get him involved in the passing game as well. Pass blocking, things of that nature, add some toughness and grit to the team and to the group. And then Thunder and Lightning, hopefully with a Tyrone Tracy Jr. Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I think you have to temper expectations for a later round running back who certainly is going to have to contribute on special teams as well. But yes, I think the juice that a player like that can bring to the stadium, to the team, to the running game, absolutely you're going to need him to chip in. Strider does not think that Shane Bowen's a good defensive coordinator. He was only good with Titans because of Jim Schwartz. Once he left, he struggled again. We have good players, and I hope he does well. Excuse me. So, yeah, well, listen, in defense of Shane Bowen, I mean, he was the 4th choice for Brian Daboll after Daboll, essentially Wink Martindale left because he didn't want to work with Daboll anymore and just said, see you later. I don't have to deal with this. And so, not Bowen's fault that he's in this position. I mean, it was a promotion from what he had in Tennessee under Mike Vrabel, where he was the DC, but Vrabel was really running the defense. And, I think it's fair to say, hey, Shane Bowen needs to do X, Y, and Z with this group. And he has a lot of responsibility here and a challenge in how to use this new talent and how to deploy it. And the expectations are high because if he doesn't, then of course there will be conversations about, well, we have all this talent. Why isn't our DC using it properly? Right. There's a whole blame game. We've seen it before with Daboll and Shane. We could see it again. I will always say, though, whether you guys think you need a new defensive coordinator or not, the focus cannot be on Shane Bowen going into this season. The focus has to be on the fact that they cannot score points on offense. They had the 31st ranked offense. They have an offensive head coach who's supposed to develop quarterbacks. They can't score points. They already ran off a great defensive coordinator after 2 years when the finger got pointed internally at the defense while the offense stunk. So we're not, this is not going to be the podcast where we bang on how much Shane Bowen needs to go or Shane Bowen's not good enough or the pressure's on Shane Bowen. I did talk about it's going to be interesting to see how he uses Abdul Carter. It's a challenge to figure out how to best deploy and get his top 11 on the field. It's going to be interesting because some of what he's going to have to do maybe is stuff he hasn't done before. But the pressure of this season and this team is on the head coach and the general manager, first and foremost. Joey B says, not for nothing. You're a big name, whether hated or loved. You're a big fish in the sports journalism industry for a top tier paper in New York, and you appreciate and interact with us more than anyone. But you guys appreciate me too, and I really am grateful to that, Joey B. Because honestly, yes, I am a professional, and yes, I work at a high-profile newspaper, and I cover a high-profile NFL team, and I have a lot of experience in this industry, and a lot of connections in it, and there's certainly a ton of things that, it being my job, make me different than, a person sitting next to me who isn't in the field. But I am very much you guys, just somebody who entered this field. Like, I am all of you. I just chased this dream and believed that I could do it early on and turned it into a reality in this profession. But my passion for sports and my desire for knowledge and my want to engage in conversations about sports and can't get enough of it and all that. Like, I'm you, I'm you. I just took this job and have developed and grown into it. But, nothing makes me better than any of you talking about, the Giants or the NFL or whatever. Yes, I'm more connected in the industry, and I do have more insight from the inside looking out versus being on the outside looking in. But, we're all the same here. We all watch what we watch. You guys do a ton of research on your teams, and you care a ton about your team. And we're here to talk about how it's going to play out, how it's going to get better, how it's all going to fit. Thank you, Joe. Joe says, when is the last time that Andrew Thomas played a full season? Was it 2022, right? It would be 2022 when they went to the playoffs. So, yeah. Yeah, that was the year. Not a coincidence that Saquon and Andrew Thomas stayed in the lineup and they went to the playoffs. Yeah, Joey B says we need new DC. Let me see. Michael says, I pray every day that Andrew Thomas stays healthy. We need him more than anyone. Yep. Hanging by a thread, that offensive line. Pat, they hired Bowen because the Titans' run-stopping game was so good. Yeah, right. According to Hard Knocks. Jay with a super chat says, will Hyatt ever learn together off the line? Jay, I think you're asking if he's going to be able to get separation and be able to learn the offense well enough to contribute consistently. And, I think it's surprising he's still on the team given where the relationship was last season with him and the organization. So I don't know how that's going to progress from here on out. Obviously they're trying to get something out of that, and they're hoping that a guy like Russell Wilson can drop some of those moon balls in, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Yes, if Bowen flounders with the defense, I could see a scenario where he gets fired midseason, especially because, like I said, we've seen them, like, they're experts at scapegoating here. Joey B says, that's why we rock with you. After we chatted in Pittsburgh, I was like, I'm going to college to get my sports degree because I want to chase my dreams. Hell yeah, Joe. Hell yeah. Let me see. Yeah, so yes, it's possible he could lose his job midseason if he doesn't get it together. Strider says, I want Bowen to do well, and I do agree. He just needs to show he can develop players in his system. He gets a lot of flack from his time with the Titans. Joey B says, this better be the year I get to wear my Talkin Ball merch, damn it. You will. Don't worry about it. Michael says, I like Tracy much more than Skattebo, but there's no doubt for pick 106, he gives you a floor at RB2 we haven't had in a decade. Our RB room will basically be making minimum salary besides Singletary. Well, Singletary's in the room. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Tracy's got to fix the fumbles too. BG, I agree with this so much. Doesn't matter how good the draft was. These guys have to win some games or they're out of here. Fresh start. Right. So this is the thing. Last year's draft, this year's draft, people have opinions on they like it. Oh, like somebody said earlier, 2 good drafts in a row from a best player available standpoint. Well, they went 3-14 last year. So if they win 4 or 5 games this year or whatever, calling those good drafts, I don't understand that. I don't think you can have one without the other. Let me see. Will Juice take over for Robinson? I love Robinson, but if Dart gets in, hope not too early because that means we still suck. I think they go with Juice for Dart and Comfort. I definitely think, Mike, that a change at the slot position or at least a rotation should be on the table because they haven't gotten enough production and, they need more at the slot position, especially in Daboll's offense, given what the slot position means to it. Chris says the only reason to blame Bowen is if the offense actually looks like a modern NFL offense, not like it looked the past 6 years. Of the offense can put 24 points up but still lose. Bowen needs to go. Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The offense needs to be competent for us before we start saying, like this defense better be good or else, right? Michael says he's nervous that the defense is going to screw it all up. 1 turnover caused last year was embarrassing through 12 weeks. What a disaster. But Michael, again, yes, you're right. Of course, you're right. That is horrendous. Yeah, of course you're right about that. But Michael, so many of those games, the teams aren't dropping back and throwing into deep coverage because the Giants are losing. You know what I'm saying? Like the game script is not putting the Giants defense in pass rush situations to pick passes off. Teams are beating the hell out of them and they're running the ball down their throat. You know what I mean? So, I think you're not wrong that defensive shortcomings could rear their heads in situations and cost the Giants in these games this year. And they did in other times last year. But my point is just the offense needs to be competent for the defense to be letting the team down. And the offense hasn't been competent. That's what I'm saying. Will Jameis sign my crab legs? Great one, Joey B. Great one. Michael suggests Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper if they have money. Guys, this has been an awesome chat. Awesome chat. Really cool jumping back into the mix and you guys being ready to rock, having some great questions and insights. Reminder, we are brought to you by MyBookie. It's mybookie.ag, playing all those odds, props, game lines. It's mybookie.ag. Use the promo code PATSPICKS and get a 50% match on your first deposit up to $2,000. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, and win with MyBookie. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today. Place your first order with that code, Talkin Ball 25 or the QR code on your screen, and get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. We're also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, estate98.com/Talkin Ball for an exclusive offer on this all-natural specialty coffee concentrate that makes a quick hot or iced cup of coffee in 10 seconds. And finally, last but not least, Sal Loretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. Sal Loretta for Men is luxury menswear and tailoring. Only the finest at Sal Loretta's in Bergen County. Go there, tell them that Pat from Talkin Ball sent you. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. Hit those like buttons right before we get out of here, guys. Those live likes drive engagement, and they tell that YouTube algorithm to remind Giants and NFL fans out there that we are here talking ball. Thank you especially to Dan, Patrick, Into, Chris, Jay, and Joey B for the super chats. Really appreciate all of you guys. Thank you so much. Let me see. Joey B says, Pat, glad to see you back. Thank you as always, bro. And I got a Cohiba for you when I see you. Appreciate that, Joey B. Bangkok says, Pat, why were you away for so long? Draft obligations. I'll close with this. Bangkok, basically, I've been working on some things behind the scenes on how to streamline some processes because I've taken on a lot with this podcast. Like, basically, I'm one-stop shopping everything from cutting the content to posting the content to creating the content, in addition to the New York Daily News full-time job and everything that comes with just living life, you know, being a father, being a husband, having a family. Like the Super Bowl trip where I brought the podcast and the show to New Orleans was great, but it reinforced for me and opened my eyes to how much I needed to, let's say, whether it's making some hirings or bringing some people on board and shopping certain things out. I want to get the merch off the ground that Joey B is talking about. I want to add things. I want to plan ahead. I want to have events where I'm at physically, where you guys, we can interact physically and in person. I want to make this all so much bigger. And so taking it all on my own, I needed a breath. I needed to take a deep breath and figure out behind the scenes on how to attack it. And so I'm using this time of year to do that, and also to kind of breathe in and out and unplug a little bit. And so that was kind of the combination of all of that together. Obviously, had some great episodes leading up to the month of the draft with tons of great guests. You know, Sterling Shepard, Jason McCourty, Justin Simmons, Cam Jordan, Benny Fowler, and I recording those was a lot of fun. Have another episode coming this week, hopefully getting it recorded with Benny Fowler and Allen Robinson to talk about draft, talk Giants, talk a lot of different football. So check that out when it drops. Bangkok, thanks for asking. He says, excellent. Excellent. Keep growing from strength to strength. Best of luck, says Bangkok. Talking Ball live from the draft next year, says Joey B. You're coming for Schefter, Pat. From your lips to God's ears, as they say, Joey B. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to the next one. I'll keep you guys updated on the new content coming. Check all my social media for updates. On X and Instagram and YouTube is typically where I'm posting most. So X is P Leonard NYDN, and Instagram and TikTok, or Instagram and YouTube, and actually TikTok, Threads, everywhere is PL on NFL. So those are the handles there. Look for me posting, you know, my next Talkin Ball live is coming now, or next Talkin Ball live is coming tonight. That's where I'll be posting those on X, on Instagram, and on YouTube. Look for it there. I don't have the next one scheduled, Joey B. But let's say this, back in the saddle now, where we're going to knock out at least one Talkin Ball live a week. So we're going to get back on the weekly schedule. It's hard for me to pick an exact night because my entire schedule, life schedule, work schedule moves. So it's hard for me to pick an exact night, but I will get to you guys and get that information to you sooner rather than later so you can prepare and be available for it. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for the super chats, for being here, for helping me drive the conversation. We've been over 2 hours here on Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard here on the Believe Network. See you guys next time. Thank you so much.